I've been in the circular economy space for, I want to say, the last 8-9 years. And so first I was with Vodafone Group, where I set up their circular economy program and rolled out with the team a number of propositions like buying back mobile phones across Europe and Australia and South Africa. I did that for a couple of years. And then about 5 years ago, I moved to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where I led the CE 100 program. You know, it's a multi-stakeholder innovation program. So we would bring in the buckets and the spades and the sandbox, and invite all the right friends. But then when you have the companies, the universities, the startups, and they would in the cities they would create their own sandcastles, if you like. We built that out in Europe and set it up in South America and did that also in North America. It's great to be inspired with this idea of a different vision, but turning it into reality is quite a different thing. And for those of you that are fans of TED, the video platform, you'll probably recognize this. It's one thing to watch a movie and a video and be inspired to now we're going to do something, but then actually nothing happens. You sort of fall off this cliff, and that's where I think I prepare. I have some slides which I'll just bring up on the screen, and I'll probably jump around a bit. So when we talk about knowledge, we think about TED as the inspiration, but then what do you do after that? How do you, the inspiration, the capacity to act? And when you look at the circular economy, my experience in the last sort of 9 years is quite exemplary of what we see where knowledge is lacking and the problem that we have with knowledge. And there are a number of things. So one, when looking at circular economy across the different organizations, the format is way too static. And what I mean with that is, we tend to push products and research into a format or in a PDF, or it's kind of like pumping out a report and sort of never see it again. I think a second big problem is the mindset towards knowledge, and so instead of connecting insights and having institutions develop research together in a much more sort of open and collaborative way, you get all of these little islands, and you see that it's not. I'm talking about the circular economy now, but you see that with most different sort of big meaningful topics. And the third problem that we saw certainly in the circular economy space is that there's no feedback with the rest of the system. So it kind of stays on its own layer. It doesn't become practical. And these sort of three challenges that I landed on with, or noticed in my career in the last 8-9 years, they were weirdly, surprisingly actually, they're very exemplary of how we generally talk about knowledge, how we deal with knowledge, how our industry is, how society has set us up to learn new things. We're pushing hard for with guides is to move away from these sort of ecosystems where it's all about winner takes all and protect your little island, to sort of much more thinking about ecosystems where you have this intricate connection. At Guides, we're a social enterprise, and we've now been around for 4 or 5 years. And we really love ecosystem thinking. I'm in this context talking a bit more about social-technical ecosystems, so the man-made ecosystems. However, the natural ecosystems, they are a great metaphor in many ways when you're talking about, well, what are some of the characteristics of ecosystem thinking? So take, for example, the coral reef, right? So with all the fishes in the ground, something like the Great Barrier Reef, it is intricately and deeply connected in many different ways. Often, we don't even know, if we're looking at that system, how they are connected. They're open. It's an open system. So, the rest of the ocean influences the coral reef as well. It's continuously evolving. It's never static. It's always changing. A second key characteristics of when you look at ecosystems, they have an emergent nature. So there's no top-down control. There's no superior fish sitting there and executive vice president fish deciding on what the coral reef needs to do. No, the interaction happens, and it's in a way kind of serendipitous, but and as such also endlessly creative. New practices arise all the time. They're unique. There's because of the complexity, there's no other like it. And also, you might have heard of things like the butterfly effect, where something distant can have a big impact, or it can't, but it's hard to see how that will happen. So you need to sort of also take a bit of a different attitude. And then I think there's something around the self-organizing nature of things. There's no representative of senior executive vice presidents of coral reef, whatever, deciding on what's going to happen next. No, it happens. It's much more sort of ground up. It doesn't, and in a way you might say it's leaderless, but leaderless doesn't mean without a leader. In fact, it's quite almost the opposite, that every individual can be a leader. And so the same thing works with when we're talking about think in ecosystems, in socio-technical ecosystems. And the way we, when you approach sort of, if you start to think in ecosystems, then you can tackle the challenges in our life and work in society in a very different way.